Hey folks, I'm Bo Ross, and today I'm going to share my experiences from the past few months of daily driving one of the most ambitious computers I've ever seen. This beautiful abomination is the Framework Laptop 16. Let's take a look. So as I alluded to at the top, this is not a review unit or a product that I'm having a cup of coffee with for a few days and then sharing my opinion on. This has actually been my primary computer for the better part of a year. And not just my primary laptop. I've been using the Framework 16 as essentially a desktop replacement, and there are very few rigorous tasks you can do with the computer that I haven't subjected this poor thing to. I've put it through its proverbial paces, and I'm excited to tell you all the things about it that I absolutely love and also genuinely loathe. So if you're watching this video, I'm gonna hazard a guess. You're already at least somewhat familiar with Framework as a company. I could probably make an entire dedicated series of videos talking about my respect and admiration for their philosophy and what they're trying to do in the tech space. For the sake of brevity, I don't want to lead us too far into the weeds. So I'll be focused more on the Framework 16 itself and the problems it's admirably trying to solve in the industry. The elevator pitch is that Framework is a company that makes computers you can actually fix yourself. There isn't a single component of this machine that a user couldn't replace with the included screwdriver and a few minutes of free time. So when something breaks, it's dirt simple to fix. It's really hard to overstate just how rare and refreshing that is in the current landscape of consumer technology. It gives you a unique sense of peace that you just don't really get with other manufacturers. Like sure, you could shell out for some spendy extended warranty, but it still puts you at the mercy of that company's support team, many of which have pretty abysmal reputations. But repairability is only one side of the Framework 16 coin. When you buy from another laptop brand, if you're lucky, you might be able to upgrade the SSD, the memory, maybe even the Wi-Fi card, but every other component will remain a snapshot of the day you bought it. The Framework feels like more of a living, breathing organism that can actually get better over time, because if you want, you can upgrade every single component to the latest and greatest. It honestly feels like investing in a desktop in many ways. When a new GigaChad CPU or GPU inevitably comes out, laptop owners experience that subtle sting of resentment, knowing the computer they sold a kidney or those feet pics to afford will never reach such great heights. Desktop owners, on the other hand, can smugly sip their kombucha and take comfort in the fact that one day, 3.5 years from now, they can afford to pick one up on eBay to incorporate into their beloved rig. One of the hallmarks of a Framework laptop is their brilliant expansion card system. In the case of the Framework 16, you've essentially got 6 USB-C interfaces, some of which are USB 4 compatible, that allow you to configure any combination of the plethora of expansion cards the company offers. As someone who reveres versatility, this is probably my favorite aspect of Framework laptops. I've seen some people say that it's just another version of dongles, but to me, it feels much more like a video game loadout you can change based on the mission at hand. For example, there are plenty of laptops that come with a built-in SD card reader. There are plenty that come with a built-in micro SD card reader. However, and please fact check me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure this is the only production laptop that can be equipped with both at the same time. I took a trip up to my family's little cabin in Canada this summer with my drone and camera in tow, and I can't tell you how luxurious it felt to have both card readers installed when I needed to offload my footage. If I'm flying somewhere, I like to toss in the 3.5mm audio port for listening to my nice headphones on the plane, maybe throw in the HDMI port for connecting to the TV at the hotel or the B&B. It just kind of feels like the computer version of an Etch-a-Sketch. That feeling is further perpetuated by the bevy of options for the top deck. You can set up your keyboard experience any way you'd like, with tons of cool add-ons ranging from tastefully understated to gaudy nightmare fuel. Though I do appreciate the ability to move the trackpad around based on user proclivities, the trade-off is widely reported janky alignment issues and an overall Fisher-Price kind of feel. I'm really hoping they release a one-piece trackpad sometime in the months to come. The Framework 16's expansion-based system follows a similar philosophy of modularity. Though not intended to be swapped out with the same frequency as the expansion cards, you can pull it off in about 5 minutes. You're also currently relegated to the 7700S dedicated GPU option or the expansion shell, which basically just comes with a couple fans, but mercifully shaves off some weight and size. They've also announced an expansion bay with 2 additional M.2 slots that I have a hunch might finally be released soon. Framework's designs are completely open source as well, which means that anyone with an electronics background and a sense of steely determination could take it upon themselves to create their own options for any of these modular systems. So let's talk about the Framework 16's build quality. If this 16-inch MacBook Pro is a sleek and sophisticated Mercedes S-Class, and this ThinkPad P17 is an indestructible Toyota Hilux, and the Framework 16 kind of feels like a 1990s Honda Accord.
You have to drive it to believe it.
In spite of its uniquely modular design, I still think the build quality is above average, but you're not going to mistake it for the fit and finish of a MacBook. To be fair, this thing is pretty much all solder and glue, and the only thing that's user replaceable is the entire computer, which Apple would be delighted to help you out with. And it does feel durable and well constructed, but unlike the ThinkPad, I don't love its chances of surviving a tumble down a flight of stairs, and I don't think I could successfully use it as a weapon in self-defense. But the real magic of the 1990s Honda Accord is that when something does inevitably go wrong, you have the peace of mind to know that not only will you be able to fix it, but it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. There are a lot of different categories for Windows laptops. You've got the ubiquitous Ultrabooks, which generally prioritize premium materials, a thin and light design, enough performance for the daily grind of a student or business professional, and a battery that'll get you through the day without too much existential dread. You've also got workstations that are generally a bit chunkier, with higher wattage components that can comfortably sustain the power and cooling for heavy workloads like code compiling and virtualization, video editing and rendering, or 3D modeling. And then you've got gaming laptops. These are purpose-built machines that basically have one job to do: crank the GPU wattage for hours on end and do their level best not to self-immolate. It seems like Framework was shooting for a vague combination of these 3 archetypes with their laptop 16. They've been pretty careful not to market this thing to any specific segments, but instead are presenting it as kind of a nondescript, powerful all-arounder. They don't call it a workstation or gaming laptop, but they do refer to it as a high-performance computer for work and play. It's a machine that does a little bit of everything, and as a result, doesn't really excel at anything. That's not to say it's not capable. It's just pretty large and kind of gangly to be considered a sleek thin and light like the Dell XPS or Lenovo Yoga Pro, and the CPU is a bit too thirsty to achieve particularly long runtimes. It has 8 cores and can boost up to 55 watts, which is respectable for some heavy lifting, but in my experience, it gets a little fussy when you try to push it for too long. And of the 3 aforementioned archetypes, sadly the Framework 16's impression of a gaming laptop is probably its least convincing. I'm sure there was a perfectly viable logistics reason for choosing AMD's 7700S as the only dedicated GPU option at launch, but even if this machine was half the price, this would be a pretty underwhelming card. You should be able to play most titles, but that combination of the dedicated GPU being pretty scuffed and the iGPU actually being really good just makes it a tricky upgrade to recommend. And the underpowered GPU isn't even the biggest obstacle for gaming on this laptop. Unfortunately, the stock 180 watt adapter simply can't keep up with the power demands while the GPU is at full load while gaming and has to borrow from the battery. So even though you're plugged in, you could lose up to 30% battery per hour until the machine eventually just taps out. Not the end of the world if you're hopping on for a few rounds over lunch or after work, but if you're really trying to tie one on and no life an entire Saturday away, it's going to get frustrating pretty quickly. I do want to mention this issue is not unique to the Framework 16. I've had much more expensive ThinkPad workstations in the past that also couldn't sustain the full wattage of their components without borrowing from the battery. But they did sip the juice a bit more demurely. The cherry on top is that the Framework 16's fans get comically loud while you're playing. To be clear, a lot of dedicated gaming laptops do the same thing, but in my opinion, this is definitely pushing the limits of tenable. If you always game with a headset, it might not be a big deal, as long as you don't have a sound-sensitive loved one within a 3-room radius. If you're not a masochist and plan to do a lot of gaming or video editing with your Framework 16, I'd highly recommend you look into an eGPU solution. When you can offload the GPU wattage, the system, unsurprisingly, can handle the heat a bit easier. It makes for a much more harmonious computing solution. Though it might be wishful thinking, I'm hoping next year we see an expansion bay option with something like a 5070, toting 12 gig of VRAM. In spite of NVIDIA's egregious heel turn in recent years, their mid-range cards are usually very efficient, and as polarizing as it can be, DLSS can make life a lot easier. There was a time in my life during which I really cared about optimizing. I wanted to make sure I was using the best things, getting them at the best price. If something new or better was coming out, I was already researching it and all the ways in which it was superior to what I had. I don't know if it's a burgeoning sense of martyrdom, perhaps my free-falling levels of testosterone now that I'm getting older, but I just don't really care about that anymore. I think if I still did, this laptop probably wouldn't work for me. If you take the truly unprecedented level of repairability out of the equation, there's really nothing this thing is the best at. In fact, I'd even argue there's nothing it's particularly great at. Think of it like you're playing an RPG, and every manufacturer has got, let's say, 15 talent points to put into the attributes of their laptop. Framework have just dumped so many points into repairability, there just wasn't enough left to really excel at anything else. There's not one aspect of this computer that I would call bad, but there's also not anything that stands out as being exceptional. Like the keyboard, the screen, the speakers, the trackpad, the battery, they're all fine. But that's what's so interesting about this platform. Unless Framework throws in the towel and goes belly up, it's almost a certainty that you'll be able to upgrade each and every one of those components in the future without having to buy a brand new laptop. Even just in the first few months since its launch, Framework has released an upgraded webcam, a kit to improve the keyboard quality, and a few new expansion cards. It's really easy to see how this thing could age like a fine wine. Now, depending on how eager you are to upgrade to the latest and greatest components, it might not be particularly cost-effective, but imagine how nice it would be in 3 or 4 years to just pick up a new mainboard and CPU versus having to buy an entirely new rig. In spite of the Framework 16's shortcomings, I can honestly say that I've genuinely loved using this thing. And it's not because it has top performance, or the most premium build quality, or the best bang for the buck value. It's because it's far and away the most interesting computer you can buy right now. In a time when laptops are becoming more and more homogenized, Framework has created something that's utterly inimitable. And I'm a huge fan of new companies that are willing to take that kind of big swing on something they believe in, rather than just parroting what's already popular. Whether or not you'll love this thing, I think depends entirely on your expectations. If you expect that a company that's in its infancy, has basically made one product before, will create something that's this ambitious and somehow do it better or even as well as OGs like Lenovo, Asus, Dell, or Apple, you should probably buy something else. I think you'll be happier. To me, this is very much an enthusiast computer. For people who love to tinker with their machine and appreciate the ever-evolving modular qualities of a desktop. Buying a Framework 16 is basically volunteering to be an investor in something you'd like to see succeed. And also kind of a product tester for a company that's figuring things out on the fly. There have been no shortage of early issues with this computer, But the framework team has been pretty great about working with the user base to resolve them, and it seems like they genuinely care about improving their products over time. If you're planning to buy into this one-of-a-kind ecosystem, I'd probably recommend saving a few bucks and skipping the dedicated GPU option. It's still going to be more than powerful enough for doing lighter duty laptop things, and if you decide one day you want to do some desktop things, you can pony up for an eGPU solution, or wait for future dedicated graphics options for which the juice might be a bit more worthy of the squeeze. Thank you sincerely for watching. If you should feel so inclined, a like, comment, or subscription are always appreciated. You're also welcome to check out my Patreon page, and I'm currently working on a website that, let's be honest, will probably never be finished. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.